The Xylos galaxy was dying. Once a vibrant network of worlds united in peace and commerce, it now languished under the tyrannical rule of the Mokhtari Empire. Nowhere was this decay more evident than in Kalen Prime, the former jewel of the Republic, now reduced to crumbling facades and desperate citizens. In the heart of the city stood the Judgment Arena, a massive oval structure of black stone and steel where justice had been perverted into brutal spectacle. The citizens of Kalen Prime were required to attend these proceedings regularly to witness the consequences of defiance against Mokhtari rule. Rowan adjusted the leather whip at his side, his fingers moving mechanically over the braided handle he had come to know too well. The weight of it sickened him, as did the title they had forced upon him, Executioner. For years ago, he had been Captain Rowan Varden, decorated officer of the Republic Defense Force. Now, he was merely a tool of Mokhtari oppression, kept alive because his former status made him useful. Watching him carry out punishments broke the spirit of any remaining resistance far more effectively than anonymous Mokhtari soldiers ever could. The leather of the whip was supple, well-oiled, and marked with tiny patterns that seemed almost beautiful if one didn't know their purpose: to tear flesh more efficiently. Rowan had maintained it meticulously, not out of pride, but necessity. The better condition it was in, the cleaner the strikes, the less suffering for those he was forced to punish. This small mercy was all he could offer. He stared at his reflection in the tarnished metal of his quarters wall. Hollow eyes stared back from a face line beyond its 36 years. His once proud military posture remained, a ghost of muscle memory he couldn't shed, but everything else about him had changed. The uniform he now wore was black and crimson, Mokhtari colors, a constant reminder of his capitulation. "Executioner Varden," came the voice through his door-comm. "Your presence is required in the arena." Immediately, Rowan's stomach tightened. No prior notification meant a special case, which usually meant someone important had been captured, someone whose punishment needed to be particularly exemplary. "Acknowledged," he responded, voice flat, devoid of the emotion churning beneath his sternum. The corridors of the administrative sector were immaculate, a stark contrast to the filth of the city beyond. Guards in polished armor stood at attention as he passed, their faceplates reflecting distorted versions of his grim expression. None spoke to him. The executioner was both revered and avoided, a position of power that no one envied. The arena was already filled when he arrived. Thousands of citizens packed the stone benches, their faces a sea of fear and forced attentiveness. Armed Mokhtari troops stood at regular intervals throughout the crowd. On the central platform, Governor Laris Ten waited, his lean frame draped in the elaborate robes of Mokhtari authority. "Ah, Executioner Varden," Ten's voice carried through the amplification field. Prompt as always. Rowan ascended the steps to the platform without responding. Engagement beyond the necessary was neither required nor welcomed. "We have a special subject today," Ten continued, turning to address the crowd. "An example of the futility of resistance." Rowan's gaze moved to the holding pen adjacent to the platform. The prisoner inside was still obscured by shadow, but he could make out a slender figure, considerably smaller than the typical insurgents they brought before him. "Bring forth the rebel," Ten commanded. Two guards opened the gate and dragged the prisoner into the light. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. The prisoner was a woman, her wrists and ankles bound in heavy averite chains. Her skin was a deep emerald green, marking her, as Illyrian, one of the races most vehemently opposed to Mokhtari rule. Despite the obvious signs of beatings, purple bruises blossoming across her green skin, dried turquoise blood at the corner of her split lip, she stood straight, her shoulders squared. It was her eyes that struck Rowan most forcefully. Brilliant amber, almost golden, they burned with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the arena more effectively than the harsh overhead lights. And in them, a defiance so pure it was almost palpable. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. 8 months ago, a raid on a suspected resistance safe house. He had been forced to accompany the Mokhtari strike team. In the chaos, as he had attempted to minimize casualties without revealing his reluctance. He had turned a corner and come face to face with a woman. Their eyes had locked for the briefest moment before she disappeared through a hidden passage. He had failed to report the encounter. Those same golden eyes now fixed on him, widening slightly in recognition before narrowing again. She remembered too. Sala. Navareth, Governor Ten announced, former princess of House Navareth, heir to the Illyrian High Council seat, now reduced to common terrorist. Rowan kept his expression neutral by force of will alone. Princess. That explained the particular viciousness of her treatment. The Mokhtari had been trying to subdue the Illyrian homeworld for years, with limited success. A royal hostage was a significant prize. Her crimes are numerous, Ten continued. Sabotage of imperial infrastructure, assassination of imperial officers, distribution of seditious materials, and most recently, involvement in the bombing of Military Sector 6, resulting in the deaths of 28 loyal imperial soldiers. The crowd remained silent, neither approving nor condemning. To do either would invite scrutiny. For these crimes, the law prescribes death. Ten paused, a cruel smile playing at his thin lips. However, in their wisdom, the Imperial High Command sees greater value in making an example of the princess. Her punishment will be broadcast throughout Illyrian space as a demonstration of imperial justice and the futility of resistance. Rowan's hand instinctively tightened on the whip. He knew what was coming. Executioner Varden. Ten turned to him. You will administer 40 lashes. Let each stroke remind her people of the cost of defiance. 40. It was excessive, deliberately so. Few survived more than 30 without immediate medical intervention. This was not punishment. It was slow execution designed for maximum propaganda value. Sala was forced to her knees by the guards, her chains secured to metal rings embedded in the platform floor. They tore the back of her simple tunic open, exposing green skin already marred by previous interrogation sessions. She did not resist, but neither did she cower. Her gaze remained fixed forward, her spine straight despite her kneeling position. Rowan stepped forward mechanically, unwinding the whip as he had done countless times before. The crowd's anticipatory silence pressed in on him like a physical weight. He raised the whip, allowing the tip to trail on the ground behind him as he measured his distance. And in that moment, something within him, something long dormant, stirred. Memories cascaded through his mind. His squad mates in the Republic forces, laughing around a fire on some forgotten world. Civilians he had protected during the early conflicts. The oath he had taken to defend the innocent. The moment he had surrendered, believing it would save lives. How many lives had his compliance actually saved? How many had it cost through his role in Mokhtari oppression? And now, this woman, this princess who had chosen resistance over comfort, who faced death with more dignity than he had faced life these past years, was to be broken by his hand. Something in Rowan's mind shifted, like a lock tumbling open after years of strain against it. The golden eyes that had haunted him for months became a focal point, a star to navigate by in a darkness he had accepted as permanent. The crowd held its breath. Governor Ten smiled in anticipation. The guards stood ready. Rowan raised the whip higher, muscles tensing. Then, in one fluid motion, he brought the whip down, not on Sala's exposed back, but against his own knee with devastating force. The crack echoed through the arena like thunder. The specialized leather, designed to tear flesh, split against the metal guard beneath his uniform trousers. The whip's handle shattered in his grip, fragments scattering across the platform. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. Shock froze the entire arena in a tableau of disbelief. Rowan didn't wait for the reaction. He lunged toward Sala, drawing the vibroblade concealed in his boot, a weapon he was permitted as executioner. With 2 precise strikes, he severed the chains binding her to the floor. What is the meaning of this? Ten's voice cracked with rage and fear. Guards, seize him. Sala's eyes met Rowan's, confusion and a spark of hope warring within them. Can you run? Rowan asked, voice low and urgent. She nodded once, already gathering her feet beneath her despite the remaining manacles. Then run. The first energy bolts sizzled past them as Rowan hauled Sala to her feet. The crowd erupted in chaos, some screaming, others scrambling for exits, a few even cheering before being silenced by nearby troops. Rowan pulled Sala toward the eastern edge of the platform, where the ceremonial steps led down into the official viewing section. "Shoot them!" Ten screamed, his composure shattered. "Shoot them now!" Rowan's body responded with the instincts of his military training. He pushed Sala ahead of him, using his larger frame as a shield as they descended the stairs. An energy bolt grazed his shoulder, sending waves of burning pain down his arm, but he kept moving. The viewing section was emptying rapidly as officials fled the unfolding disaster. Rowan spotted a service door behind an ornate pillar and directed Sala toward it with a gesture. Another volley of energy bolts impacted around them, splintering the wooden benches and sending splinters flying. The service door yielded to Rowan's emergency override code, a small mercy that his credentials hadn't yet been purged from a system. They stumbled through into a narrow maintenance corridor lit by harsh fluorescent strips. "This way," Rowan gasped, feeling warm blood trickling down his back from the bolt wound. Service tunnels connect to the lower city. Sala moved with surprising agility, despite her restraints and obvious injuries. "You're insane," she said, her voice husky and accented. "They'll hunt us to the edges of the galaxy." "Probably," Rowan agreed, leading her down a ladder into the dank underbelly of the arena. "But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be that person another day." The tunnels beneath the arena were a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and narrow walkways. The sounds of pursuit echoed distantly behind them, growing more organized by the minute. Rowan navigated by memory and instinct, choosing paths that doubled back and intersected, hoping to confuse their pursuers. "You're bleeding," Sala observed as they paused at a junction. Despite her own condition, there was concern in her voice. "It's nothing," Rowan replied, though the wound throbbed mercilessly. "We need to get those restraints off you." He examined the manacles on her wrists. Standard Mokhtari security cuffs, but high grade. His vibroblade wouldn't cut through them. "There's a maintenance bay 2 levels down," he decided. "Should have tools we can use." They continued through the tunnels, the sounds of pursuit fading and then returning as their hunters spread out through the complex. Twice they had to backtrack to avoid security drones patrolling the larger corridors. The maintenance bay, when they reached it, was mercifully empty. Rowan barred the door with a heavy equipment cart, while Sala examined the tools scattered across the workbenches. "Here," she said, holding up a plasma cutter. "This should work." Rowan took the tool, adjusting its settings to the lowest effective power. "Hold very still," he instructed, bringing the blue flame close to the metal around her wrists. Sala didn't flinch as the heat rose to uncomfortable levels. The specialized alloy of the cuffs resisted briefly before yielding with a hiss. The restraints fell away, revealing raw, chafed skin beneath. "Your turn," Sala said, taking the cutter from him and moving to the ankle restraints with surprising skill. As the last manacle fell away, she straightened, rubbing her wrists. Without the chains, she moved with a fluid grace that spoke of combat training. She flexed her hands, as if reacquainting herself with freedom, then met Rowan's gaze directly. "Why?" she asked simply. Before Rowan could answer, the distant sound of a security alarm blared through the tunnels. "Later," he said. "We need to reach the lower city. Once we're in the Warrens, we can disappear, at least temporarily." Sala nodded, immediately focused on survival. She gathered a few small tools from the workbench, secreting them in the tiers of her clothing with practiced efficiency. "Lead the way, executioner," she said, the title carrying no venom, merely irony. "Rowan," he corrected, hating the sound of his former title. "Just Rowan." They slipped out through a secondary door, descending deeper into the infrastructure of Kalen Prime. The neat corridors gradually gave way to rougher tunnels, then to ancient sewers that predated the Mokhtari occupation. The air grew thick with moisture and decay, but it meant they were approaching the boundary between the administrative sector and the less controlled areas of the city. "We're close to the Warrens now," Rowan explained as they navigated a partially collapsed tunnel. "It's not safe, but different dangers. Street gangs, desperate people, black market, but no official Mokhtari presence. They consider it beneath them to patrol effectively." "I know the Warrens," Sala replied, surprising him. "The Resistance has had safe houses there." The past tense wasn't lost on Rowan. "You were betrayed," he stated rather than asked. Sala's expression hardened. "Yes, by one I consider friend. House politics, extending even to rebellion, it seems." They emerged from the tunnel system through a drainage outlet camouflaged by years of urban detritus. The Warrens sprawled before them, a chaotic jumble of ancient buildings, makeshift shelters, and repurposed wreckage extending for kilometers. Smoke from countless fires formed a perpetual haze beneath the domes that protected the city from Kalen's toxic atmosphere. The relative darkness was a blessing, concealing their distinctive appearances. Rowan's executioner uniform and Sala's green skin would both attract unwanted attention. "We need to find shelter, clean these wounds, and change clothes," Rowan said, scanning the nearby structures. "I know a place. An old medic from my unit. If he's still alive, he might help us." Sala nodded, but her amber eyes remained wary. Trust was a luxury neither of them could fully afford yet. They moved through the shadowed alleys of the Warrens, avoiding the more populated areas where informants might lurk. Even here, Mokhtari credits flowed freely for information on fugitives, especially high-value ones. Twice they had to duck into recessed doorways as patrol drones skimmed overhead, their scanning beams sweeping the wider thoroughfares. The medic's clinic was nestled between a defunct repair shop and what appeared to be an abandoned dwelling. No sign marked it, but Rowan recognized the subtle symbol etched into the doorframe. The Old Republic Medical Corps insignia, modified to look like a simple geometric decoration to untrained eyes. He knocked in a pattern he hoped his old comrade would remember. 3 sharp, 2 soft, pause, 1 sharp. The code for friend in need. Long moments passed. Rowan was about to suggest they move on when the door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of a weathered face and one suspicious eye. "Varden." The voice was incredulous, barely above a whisper. "By all the stars, they said you were dead." "Not yet, Kel," Rowan replied, relief flooding through him, though not for lack of trying on the Mokhtari's part. "We need help." The eyes shifted to Sala, widening at the sight of her Illyrian features and obvious injuries. "Get in, quickly," Kel hissed, opening the door just enough for them to slip through before securing it with multiple locks. The interior was dim and cramped, but scrupulously clean, a rarity in the Warrens. Medical supplies and equipment, much of it cobbled together from salvage parts, lined the walls. A few cots screened by fabric partitions occupied one corner. Kel himself was thinner than Rowan remembered, his once robust frame whittled down to sinew and bone. His dark hair had gone completely gray, and deep lines etched his face, but his hands were steady as he immediately began gathering supplies. "Sit, both of you," he commanded, falling into the familiar manner of a military medic. "When the 7 hells happened, the broadcasts are chaos. Something about an escape from the arena, the executioner gone rogue." He paused, eyes fixing on Rowan's uniform with sudden comprehension. "Stars above, Varden. You were the executioner." Rowan couldn't meet his old friend's gaze. "Yes." Kel was silent for a long moment, then simply nodded. "We all did what we had to in order to survive," he said quietly. "I'm just glad you found your way back." He turned his attention to Sala, gently examining her numerous injuries with professional detachment. "Illyrian physiology," he muttered. "Been a while, but I remember the basics. Different blood composition, higher tolerance for certain toxins, lower for others." Sala submitted to the examination with stoic silence, though Rowan noted the tension in her shoulders. Trust would come slowly, if at all. "You first," Kel said to Rowan, gesturing to the energy weapon burn on his shoulder. "That needs cleaning and sealing before infection sets in." Rowan removed the top portion of his uniform, revealing more scars than smooth skin beneath. A roadmap of his years in Republic service and Mokhtari captivity. Kel worked efficiently, cleaning the wound with antiseptic that stung like liquid fire, then applying a synthetic skin seal that would promote healing. "Your turn, Your Highness," Kel said to Sala, the honorific causing her to stiffen. "How did you?" "Even in the Warrens, we hear things," Kel explained. The capture of an Illyrian princess was significant news. "Though I must say, you don't much look the royal part at the moment." A ghost of a smile touched Sala's lips. "Good. I left that life behind when I joined the resistance." While Kel treated Sala's more extensive injuries, Rowan searched through a storage crate the medic indicated, finding civilian clothing that would help them blend in. The weight of the executioner's uniform falling away from his body felt like shedding a second skin, one that had grown increasingly toxic. "You can't stay here," Kel said as he finished applying dermal regenerator patches to the worst of Sala's lacerations. "This will be among the first places they look once they identify you, Varden. I'm already on their watch lists as a former Republic medic. We just need a few hours to rest and plan," Rowan said. "Then we'll move on. I won't put you at risk any longer than necessary." Kel nodded, moving to a locked cabinet and withdrawing a small package. "Supplies," he explained. "Medications, some nutrient bars, clean dressings. And this." He placed a compact blaster pistol on top of the bundle. "Old Republic issue. Not as flashy as Mokhtari weapons, but reliable and untraceable." "Thank you," Sala said, the first word she had spoken since entering the clinic. "Your kindness won't be forgotten. Just stay alive," Kel replied. "That'll be thanks enough." While Sala rested on one of the cots, Rowan and Kel spoke in low voices near the clinic's single window. The streets outside were unusually active for this time of night, with more passers-by than typical and the occasional flash of search beams. "The whole city's on lockdown," Kel informed him. "They've deployed everything, ground troops, drones, even called in special forces units from off-world, according to the emergency broadcasts." "You really kicked the hive, Varden." "I know," Rowan acknowledged grimly. "But I couldn't do it anymore, Kel. I just couldn't." The older man's expression softened. "What was the breaking point? After all this time?" Rowan's gaze drifted to Sala's sleeping form. "Her eyes," he said simply. "They reminded me of who I used to be, who I should have remained." Kel followed his look, understanding dawning. "Be careful there," he warned. "That path has complications beyond the obvious." "It's not like that," Rowan protested, though without complete conviction. "It's about doing the right thing, finally." "If you say so," Kel replied, unconvinced. "Now, about getting you out of the city." They spent the next hour discussing routes and options, most discarded as too risky. The Mokhtari had locked down all official exit points from Kalen Prime, and the unofficial ones would be watched by bounty hunters eager for the substantial reward that had undoubtedly been posted. The old spaceport, Sala's voice startled them both. She had risen silently and joined them at the window. "The one in the industrial sector. It's been decommissioned for years, but the Resistance occasionally uses it for emergency extractions. The atmospheric shielding is weak there. Small ships can slip through if timed with the maintenance cycles of the dome." Kel raised an eyebrow. "The industrial sector is a death trap. Automated security, leftover war machines from the initial occupation, radiation pockets. Which is why the Mokhtari don't patrol it heavily," Sala pointed out. "They let the hazards do their work for them." "She's right," Rowan admitted. "It's our best option. But we'd need a ship and a pilot willing to risk extraction." "I might know someone," Kel said reluctantly. "No guarantees, but there's a smuggler who owes me for patching up his crew after a deal went bad. He's not Resistance, but he hates the Mokhtari enough to consider it. Can you contact him?" Kel moved to an ancient communication console partially hidden behind medical supplies. "I can try. Might take time to get a response, if any." While Kel worked, Rowan and Sala gathered the supplies and changed into the civilian clothes, nondescript gray and brown garments typical of the Warren's working poor. On Sala, they hung loose, but served to conceal her distinctive skin tone with high collars and long sleeves. A scarf could be wrapped around the lower portion of her face, with hair tucked into a cap, leaving only her eyes visible, eyes whose vivid color might still betray her, but it was the best they could manage. "When we leave here," Rowan said quietly, checking the blaster Kel had provided, "things will get worse before they get better. The industrial sector isn't just dangerous because of the hazards Kel mentioned. It's where the most desperate end up, the addicted, the criminal, those with nothing left to lose." Sala adjusted the scarf around her neck. "I've dealt with worse." "I don't doubt it," Rowan replied. "I just want you to be prepared." She paused, studying him with those penetrating amber eyes. "Why did you do it?" she asked, returning to the question from earlier. "Really? You had a position of relative safety. You were surviving. Why throw it away now, for someone you don't even know?" Rowan considered his answer carefully. "Because every time I used that whip, a piece of me died," he finally said. "I told myself I was minimizing harm, that someone else would be worse in my place. But the truth is, I was a coward. I chose survival over principle. When I saw you, saw that defiance in your eyes despite everything they'd done to you, I couldn't hide from that truth anymore." Sala's expression remained unreadable, but something in her posture softened slightly. "Thank you," she said simply, "for finding your courage when it mattered." Before Rowan could respond, Kel returned from the communication console. "Good news and bad news," he announced. "My contact is willing to attempt extraction, but not for another 12 hours. He's currently dodging Mokhtari patrols 2 systems away and can't risk approaching Kalen until his scheduled supply run." 12 hours is too long," Rowan said, shaking his head. "The search will only intensify. We need to move now, find somewhere to hide until the extraction." "I might know a place," Sala offered. "An old resistance cache in the industrial sector itself. If it hasn't been discovered, it would have supplies, possibly weapons." Kel looked skeptical. "If the resistance knew about it." "Only 3 people had the location," Sala said firmly. "Myself, my second-in-command who died in the ambush that captured me, and our quartermaster who is off-world. The traitor didn't have this information." Rowan and Kel exchanged glances. "It's the best option we have," Rowan decided. "Kel, give your contact the extraction coordinates when you have them. We'll make our way to the industrial sector and Sala's cache, then to the old spaceport." The medic nodded, his expression grim. "I'll do what I can from here. There are still some old Republic networks operating in the shadows. I'll put out the word to watch for Mokhtari movements near your route." They gathered their meager supplies, preparing to return to the dangerous streets. As they reached the door, Kel clasped Rowan's arm in the old Republic military farewell. "Varden," he said quietly, "if you make it off-world, seek out Beacon Point. It's a hidden station in the Outer Reach. Rumors say some Republic military leaders regrouped there after the surrender. They're rebuilding slowly." Hope, an emotion Rowan had nearly forgotten, flickered to life in his chest. "Beacon Point," he repeated. "Thank you, old friend. Now go," Kel urged, keying open the locks. "And may the stars guide your path." The streets of the Warrens were tense with unusual activity. Residents peered nervously from windows and doorways as armed Mokhtari patrols passed through areas they typically avoided. Search drones hovered at intersections, their scanners sweeping methodically through the crowds. Rowan and Sala kept to the shadows, using the locals' natural aversion to Mokhtari attention to blend with the flow of people seeking to avoid the patrols. They took a circuitous route, doubling back several times when they spotted checkpoints or drone concentrations ahead. The boundary between the Warrens and the industrial sector was marked by a gradual deterioration of even the minimal living standards of the slums. Buildings became more skeletal, reduced to frameworks stripped of anything valuable. The population thinned, with only the most desperate or dangerous remaining in this no-man's land. "There," Sala murmured, nodding toward a massive structure looming ahead. "The old deuterium refinery. Our cache is beneath it, in what used to be a radiation shelter." The refinery was an imposing monolith of corroded metal and cracked plasticrete, rising like the skeleton of some ancient beast against the perpetual twilight of the domed sky. Warning signs in multiple languages announced radiation hazards, structural instability, and automated security measures. Those warnings, Are they accurate? Rowan asked, eyeing the facility warily. Partially, Sala replied. The radiation is minor, contained to specific areas we can avoid. The structural warnings are mostly Mokhtari exaggeration to discourage scavengers. The security systems, however, she frowned. Those are real and likely still active. They approached cautiously, using the abundant debris for cover. As they drew closer, Rowan could make out the distinctive silhouettes of automated sentry turrets at key points around the perimeter, older models, but still lethal. The Resistance found a weakness in their targeting systems, Sala explained in a whisper. They operate on light detection calibrated for normal human movement speeds. Move slowly enough, and they register you as environmental drift. Rowan nodded, though skepticism must have shown on his face. Trust me, Sala added. I've done this before. At the perimeter fence, a corroded metal barrier more symbolic than functional. They paused, scanning for patrol patterns in the automated defenses. The nearest sentry turret swiveled in a slow, predictable arc, its sensor array glowing a dull red in the gloom. Now, Sala whispered when the turret turned away. Remember, slow and steady. If it locks on, freeze completely. The system will reset after 7 seconds if it doesn't confirm a target. They moved into the open with excruciating slowness. Each step carefully placed, bodies kept low. Rowan felt sweat beating on his forehead despite the chill air, every instinct screaming to run for cover. The turret completed its arc and began to turn back toward them when they were only halfway to the nearest building. Fris Salabrid. They became statues, not even daring to blink as the turret's sensor swept over their position. The red glow intensified momentarily, and Rowan's heart hammered against his ribs. Then, as Sala had predicted, the light dimmed and the turret continued its program pattern. Keep moving, she instructed once the danger had passed. They reached the shelter of a collapsed wall, ducking behind it as a second turret activated farther inside the compound. Using the same painstaking approach, they navigated the defensive perimeter, eventually reaching a half-collapsed outbuilding connected to the main refinery by a rusted walkway. The entrance is here, Sala said, kneeling beside what appeared to be a random piece of debris. She located a hidden catch, revealing a biometric scanner cunningly disguised as a broken conduit fitting. Pressing her palm to it, she winced slightly as it sampled her blood. DNA recognition, she explained. More reliable than fingerprints or retinal scans, which can be duplicated. With a soft hiss, a section of flooring receded, revealing a narrow stairway, descending into darkness. Sala produced a small light from their supplies, and they descended, the panel sliding closed above them with barely a sound. The shelter beneath was more extensive than Rowan had expected, a network of small chambers branching off from a central room equipped with basic survival necessities. Defunct starship parts had been repurposed as furniture, and illumination came from power cells rigged to ancient emergency lights. Not exactly luxurious, Sala commented, but secure. The walls are lined with lead and signal-dampening materials. We're effectively invisible down here. Rowan surveyed the space with a professional eye. Defensible, too, with only one entry point. Good choice for a cache. Sala moved to a wall panel, entering a code into a concealed keypad. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a small armory, blaster rifles, explosives, communication equipment, and medical supplies beyond what Kel had provided. This should improve our odds, she said, lifting a compact rifle and checking its charge. Military grade, not the civilian models. Rowan examined the weapons, selecting one for himself and extra power cells for both. We should rest in shifts, he suggested. I'll take first watch. Sala nodded, moving to one of the makeshift bunks. Wake me in 4 hours. We'll need to move well before the extraction time to secure the spaceport area. As she settled onto the narrow cot, Rowan found himself studying her with growing curiosity. You're not what I expected, he admitted. One amber eye opened, regarding him quizzically. And what did you expect from an Illyrian princess? Someone softer, he said honestly. less competent in combat situations, less willing to get your hands dirty. A bitter smile curved her lips. House Navarrete has produced military leaders for 6 generations. We don't believe in ruling from comfortable thrones while others fight our battles. How did you end up with the resistance? Truly, I mean, royalty rarely risks itself in rebellion. Sala was quiet for so long that Rowan thought she might have fallen asleep. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. When the Makhtari first approached Illyria, they came with treaties and promises of mutual prosperity. My father, the High Counselor, was suspicious, but many in our government were eager for the advanced technology and trade opportunities the Empire offered. She sat up, fully awake now, caught in the telling. I was sent as a diplomatic representative to their central worlds to evaluate the truth of their offers. And you saw the reality behind the facade? Rowan guessed. Yes, slavery masked as labor contracts. Exploitation of resources leaving entire worlds barren. Cultural erasure presented as integration. Her voice hardened. I returned with evidence, warned the council of what was coming. Half believed me, half called me an alarmist, accusing me of sabotaging a valuable alliance. By the time the Makhtari showed their true intentions, it was too late for unified resistance, Rowan said, filling in the familiar pattern he had seen play out across the galaxy. By then, several members of the council had already accepted Makhtari bribes or threats. When the invasion began, we were divided from within. My father was assassinated in the first wave, officially declared a tragic accident during the peacekeeping operation. Her fingers clenched into fists. I fled that night, with only my most trusted guards. We joined the nascent resistance movement forming in the outer provinces. And you've been fighting ever since, Rowan said, not a question, but an acknowledgement. Yes, 5 years now. She studied him with renewed intensity. What about you? You were Republic military before. Before I became the thing I once fought against, Rowan finished bitterly. Before you were put in an impossible position, she corrected, surprising him. Rowan leaned against the wall, the weight of memory pressing down on him. I commanded a special operations unit during the Republic's last stand at Draymar. We were supposed to hold the orbital defense platform while civilian transports evacuated. His voice grew distant. We held for 3 days against overwhelming forces. On the 4th, we received orders to surrender. The Republic military command had capitulated. I remember. Hearing about Draymar, Salas said quietly. The reports claimed total Republic defeat. It wasn't defeat. It was betrayal. Rowan's voice hardened. Half the fleet commanders had already made deals with the Makhtari. They disabled their ships' weapons systems during the battle, leaving the rest of us exposed. He closed his eyes briefly. My unit was captured intact. Most prisoners were sent to labor camps, but the Makhtari had other ideas for officers with my experience. They gave you a choice that wasn't really a choice, Sala guessed. Become an executioner or watch my entire unit executed slowly, one by one. Rowan's face was a mask of old pain. I told myself I could minimize suffering, that someone else would be crueler. Small mercies to justify my cowardice. Survival isn't cowardice, Salas said firmly. And in the end, you chose differently. Too late for too many, Rowan replied, but felt a fractional easing of the weight he had carried for years. They lapsed into silence, each absorbed in private thoughts. After a while, Sala's breathing deepened as exhaustion claimed her. Rowan maintained his vigil, alert for any sound from above that might indicate discovery. The shelter's environmental system hummed quietly, recycling the stale air. For hours passed, marked by the ancient chronometer on Rowan's borrowed wrist unit. He should wake Sala for her shift, but found himself reluctant to disturb her rest. The brief vulnerability she had shown during their conversation had stirred something protective in him, a feeling he had thought beaten out of him during his years of enforced cruelty. A subtle vibration ran through the shelter, dislodging dust from the ceiling. Rowan tensed, hand moving to his weapon. Another vibration followed, stronger than the first. not the random settling of an old structure. This was systematic, deliberate. Sala, he called softly, moving to her side. Wake up. Something's happening. She came alert instantly, reaching for her rifle before her eyes were fully open. What is it? Movement above. Heavy equipment, I think. They listened intently. The vibrations continued, accompanied now by a rhythmic thudding that reverberated through the structure. Search pattern, Sala said grimly. They're using seismic detectors to look for hidden spaces. How long before they find us? Not long. The shelter's shielding will confuse their readings temporarily, but with enough passes. She left the implication hanging. We need to move now, Rowan decided. Not wait for the extraction. Is there another way out of here? Sala nodded, already gathering essential supplies. Emergency tunnel leads to maintenance access for the refinery cooling systems. From there we can reach the old spaceport, but it's not a direct route. They quickly packed weapons, medical supplies, and the communication device needed to contact their extraction pilot. Sala led the way to the farthest chamber, where she activated another hidden panel revealing a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for one person. It'll be tight, she warned, and there's a section flooded with coolant runoff that we'll have to get through. Better than waiting to be found, Rowan replied. You first, I'll seal it behind us. Sala squeezed into the tunnel, using her smaller frame to advantage. Rowan followed, finding it a much tighter fit with his broader shoulders. He pulled the concealed door closed as he entered, engaging the locking mechanism. It wouldn't stop determined searchers for long, but might buy them precious minutes. The tunnel was claustrophobic, its walls rough-hewn from the bedrock beneath the refinery. Their lights cast jumping shadows as they crawled forward, the vibrations from the search operation above growing more distant. After nearly half an hour of uncomfortable progress, they reached a junction where the tunnel widened slightly into a natural cavern. Multiple passages branched outward, their destinations unmarked. This way, Sala indicated the leftmost passage. The others are dead ends or too unstable to use. The sound of running water grew steadily louder as they continued. Soon the tunnel floor became slick with moisture, then gave way to shallow standing liquid that deepened with each meter they progressed. The flooded section is just ahead, Sala explained, pausing to secure their supplies in waterproof containment bags from the cache. About 20 meters long, completely submerged in parts. The coolant is non-toxic but cold enough to induce hypothermia with prolonged exposure. Rowan nodded grimly. How deep does it get? Just above head height at the deepest point. We need to hold our breath and feel our way through. She hesitated. Your shoulder wound. Will it be a problem? I'll manage, Rowan assured her, though the sealed energy burn already throbbed at the prospect of immersion in cold liquid. They secured their weapons and the most critical supplies to their bodies, placing lights in waterproof pouches that would continue to function underwater. The tunnel ahead disappeared into dark, still water that reflected their lights in shifting patterns. Stay close, Sala said. There's a guide rope mounted along the right wall. If we get separated, follow it. She didn't need to explain what would happen if either of them became disoriented in the pitch-black, underwater section of the tunnel. They waded in, the cold striking like physical blows against exposed skin. When the water reached chest height, they paused for final preparations. Deep breaths, Sala advised. The section where we need to submerge isn't long, but the cold makes it feel longer. Rowan nodded, filling his lungs methodically. At Sala's signal, they ducked beneath the surface, lights cutting weak swathes through the murky water. The guide rope was rough against Rowan's fingers as he pulled himself forward, fighting the instinct to surface as the cold penetrated deeper. The tunnel curved downward, then up again, the promised submerged section. Rowan's lungs began to burn as they passed the lowest point. The wound on his shoulder flared with pain as the cold seeped through the synthetic seal. He focused on Sala's form ahead of him, on the rhythmic pull of hand over hand along the guide rope. Just as the need for air became desperate, the tunnel angled upward more sharply. They surfaced together, gasping in a confined space where the tunnel ceiling rose just enough above the water level to create a breathing pocket. Halfway, Sala managed between shivers. Rest a moment, then continue. They clung to outcropping rocks, bodies already numbing from the cold. After brief recovery, they submerged again for the final stretch. This section seemed interminable, the guide rope rough against water-wrinkled fingers, muscles protesting the constant forward motion against the weight of sodden clothing. Finally, the tunnel began to rise more consistently. The water level dropped to shoulders, then chest, then waist. They emerged on a sloped section of tunnel that led upward away from the flooded area, collapsing briefly on the dry stone to catch their breath and let circulation return to numbed extremities. That wasn't so bad, Rowan joked weakly through chattering teeth. Sala's laugh was a surprised, genuine sound. You have an interesting definition of not bad, former executioner. They changed quickly into the spare clothing they had waterproofed, the dry fabric a blessed relief against cold skin. Rowan checked the seal on his shoulder wound, intact, though the skin around it had paled alarmingly from a cold. How much further to the spaceport? He asked as they repacked their supplies. Another 2 kilometers through maintenance tunnels. Then we'll need to cross a section of exposed refinery floor to reach the spaceport perimeter, Sala replied. The challenging part will be the timing. The atmospheric dome's maintenance cycle creates a window of only 6 minutes when a ship can slip through undetected. And if we miss that window, the next one is 14 hours later. They pressed on through increasingly industrial tunnels, the natural rock giving way to reinforced conduits designed for maintenance drones. Twice they had to backtrack to avoid active machinery, ancient pumps and filtration systems that continued their programmed functions long after the refinery had been abandoned. Eventually, they reached a vertical access shaft with a ladder leading upward. Sala paused, checking a schematic she had apparently memorized. We're beneath the main processing floor now, she explained. Once we climb this shaft, we'll be exposed until we reach the connecting bridge to the spaceport. Rowan checked the charge on his rifle. Any automated defenses we should know about? The refinery floor should be clear. The resistance disabled most systems in this section. The spaceport itself has perimeter sensors, but they're oriented outward to prevent intrusion, not toward the refinery. Our concern is Mokhtari patrols. If they've figured out our destination. She left the thought unfinished. They both knew the odds. Let's contact our extraction pilot, Rowan suggested. Confirm he's still coming and give him our status. Sala nodded, activating the secure communication device from their supplies. After a series of encrypted handshakes, a gruff voice emerged from the speaker. This is Tarek. You the package I'm supposed to collect. Confirmed, Sala replied. We're approaching the extraction point now. What's your ETA? 90 minutes to atmospheric entry. You'd better be ready. I'm not circling around on this one. Too hot. Understood. We'll be in position. Watch for the signal. The communication ended abruptly. Sala met Rowan's questioning look. Smugglers aren't known for pleasantries, she said with a slight smile. But Tarek is reliable, according to your medic friend. 90 minutes, Rowan mused. That's cutting it close to the dome maintenance cycle. He'll time it perfectly, Sala assured him. That's why smugglers get paid so well. Precision under pressure. They began their ascent up the access shaft, the ladder rungs slick with decades of industrial residue. At the top, a heavy hatch required both their strength to dislodge from years of disuse. It opened onto the cavernous main floor of the refinery, a vast space filled with looming machinery, processing vats, and a complex network of catwalks and gantries suspended above. The air was thick with metallic dust and a lingering chemical smell of deuterium processing. What little light filtered through grime-covered skylights cast the machinery in ghostly silhouettes. The stillness was eerie, a space designed for activity and noise, frozen in abandoned silence. The bridge to the spaceport is on the far side, Sala whispered, pointing to a barely visible walkway extending from the upper level. We'll need to cross the main floor, then climb to the gantry level. They moved cautiously through the forest of machinery, keeping to shadows and using the massive processing units as cover. The floor was treacherous, slick in places with leaked lubricants, scattered with debris in others. Their progress was slow but steady, each pause accompanied by careful listening for any sound beyond the subtle groans of the settling structure. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a metallic clatter echoed from somewhere ahead, followed by the distinctive electronic chirp of Makhtari communication devices. Rowan pulled Sala behind a massive filtration tank, signaling for silence. They pressed against the cold metal, straining to hear. Sweep completed on lower levels. No sign of targets. The voice was distorted by the cavernous acoustics, but recognizably Makhtari military. Continue search pattern Delta. They're here somewhere. Commander Vex wants them alive if possible, but authorization for lethal force is granted if they resist. A second voice, more authoritative. Rowan and Sala exchanged grim looks. Commander Vex was Makhtari Special Forces, notorious for both effectiveness and cruelty. If he was personally overseeing the hunt, their situation was even more desperate than they had realized. How many do you think? Rowan mouthed silently. Sala held up 4 fingers, then shrugged, her best estimate. They remained frozen in place as footsteps approached their position, the heavy tread of armored Makhtari troops moving with professional precision through the refinery floor. A beam of light swept past their hiding place, illuminating dust particles in the stale air. Sensors picking up residual heat signatures, one of the voices reported. Recent movement through this area. Spread out, the commanding voice ordered. Check all concealment points. They can't have gone far. The footsteps diverged, moving in different directions. Rowan peered carefully around the edge of the filtration tank. In the gloom, he could make out the silhouettes of 6 Makhtari soldiers, more than Sala had estimated, their sleek armor equipped with enhanced sensor packages and heavy weapons. He ducked back, mind racing through options. A firefight in these conditions would be suicidal. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Stealth remained their only advantage, but with active sensors searching, that advantage was rapidly diminishing. Sala touched his arm, pointing upward. Above them, a network of pipes connected to the filtration tank extended toward the ceiling and the gantry level. It was a risky climb, completely exposed if any of the soldiers looked up, but it offered their only chance of reaching the bridge without direct confrontation. Rowan nodded understanding. Using hand signals from their military backgrounds, they coordinated their plan. Sala would go first, being lighter and more agile. Rowan would follow, covering their rear. Sala holstered her weapon and began the ascent, moving with impressive grace despite her recent injuries. The pipes were slick but provided adequate handholds. Rowan watched the patrol movements below, waiting for the optimal moment when all soldiers' attention was directed away. When Sala had reached the halfway point to the gantry, Rowan began his own climb. The exertion pulled painfully at his shoulder wound, but he pushed through it, focusing on each handhold, each careful placement of feet against the metal surface. They were almost to the top when disaster struck. A section of pipe, weakened by decades of corrosion, gave way beneath Rowan's weight with a sharp crack. He maintained his grip on a different section, avoiding a fall, but the broken piece clattered to the refinery floor below. There! A Makhtari voice shouted. Upper level. Energy weapons discharged, bolts of concentrated plasma sizzling past them and impacting the ceiling in showers of sparks. Sala reached the gantry and turned to provide covering fire, her rifle, sending precise shots toward the Makhtari positions. Keep climbing, she yelled to Rowan, abandoning stealth now that they were discovered. Rowan hauled himself upward with renewed urgency as energy bolts continued to fly around him. One passed, so close he felt the heat of it against his cheek. Another struck the pipe just below his boot, melting through the metal. With a final surge of effort, he reached the gantry. Sala grabbed his arm, helping to pull him over the railing as she continued firing one-handed at the soldiers below. Run! Rowan shouted, bringing his own weapon to bear to provide retreating cover fire. They sprinted along the gantry toward the bridge connection, energy bolts striking the metal walkway around them. The Mokhtari had begun to ascend various access points to the upper level, their tactical formation designed to cut off escape routes. "There's the bridge." Sala pointed ahead to where a narrow walkway extended across the void between buildings, connecting the refinery to the abandoned spaceport. "Once across, we can seal the access doors." They pushed forward, conserving ammunition with precisely aimed shots intended to slow pursuit rather than eliminate it. Neither of them harbored illusions about their chances of defeating a full Mokhtari tactical team. The bridge entrance loomed ahead, a reinforced doorway that had once been secured but now hung partially open. Beyond it, the enclosed bridge stretched like an umbilical between structures, its transparent walls revealing the dizzying height above the industrial complex. Rowan reached the doorway first, securing their path while Sala delivered a final barrage of covering fire. As she backed through the entrance, Rowan slammed the heavy door shut, engaging the manual locks that, thankfully, still functioned. "That won't hold them long," he warned, already moving toward the far end of the bridge. "It doesn't need to," Sala replied. "Just long enough." They raced across the bridge, acutely aware of their exposure. Through the transparent walls, they could see movement on the ground far below, more Mokhtari forces converging on the area. Behind them, impacts against the sealed door indicated their pursuers had arrived. The bridge terminated at another reinforced door leading into the spaceport's maintenance level. This one was securely locked, requiring Sala to input a complex code into a keypad that barely functioned. "Come on," she muttered, fingers flying across the corroded interface. A loud bang echoed behind them, breaching charges being set on the refinery side door. "Sala," Rowan warned, taking up a defensive position. "Almost there," she replied, concentration unwavering. The keypad emitted a weak chime, and the spaceport door released with a pneumatic hiss. "Got it." They slipped through just as the distant door exploded inward. Energy bolts streaked down the bridge, impacting harmlessly against the closing spaceport door as Rowan engaged its locking mechanism. They found themselves in a dimly lit corridor that showed signs of resistance modification. Crude but effective barricades at strategic points, hidden weapon caches, and direction markers visible only under certain light frequencies. "This way," Sala directed, following the concealed markers. "The launch pad access is through the old control center." They moved quickly through the abandoned spaceport, a facility once bustling with interstellar commerce, now reduced to echoing emptiness. Occasional signs of the Resistance's presence appeared. Recently used equipment, fresh supplies cached in hidden compartments, communication relays disguised as defunct machinery. "The Resistance uses this as a secondary evacuation point," Sala explained as they climbed a spiral staircase toward the control level. "Never as a primary base, too exposed to orbital scans, but vital as an emergency exit." The control center, when they reached it, retained the ghost of its former importance. Wrapped workstations stood in concentric circles around a central holographic projector, dead now for years. Panoramic windows looked out over the launch field where a few derelict ships sat in various states of dismantlement. "How much time until extraction?" Rowan asked, checking the perimeter security through the control room monitors that Sala had managed to activate. 47 minutes, she replied, studying a display showing atmospheric conditions. "And 51 until the dome maintenance cycle." Cutting it very close. A distant explosion reverberated through the structure, the Mokhtari breaching another barrier. Their pursuit was relentless, systematic, closing the net around the spaceport. "We need a diversion," Rowan decided. "Something to draw them away from the landing pad when our ride arrives." Sala nodded, already moving to one of the Resistance supply caches. She returned with several compact, explosive devices, military-grade, with remote detonators. "We can set these at different points." Through the facility, she suggested. "Trigger them sequentially to simulate movement away from the landing area." "Good," Rowan agreed. "I'll place them at the far end, near the cargo processing area. You prepare the landing pad access and signal our extraction." "Ça la hésitative." "Splitting up increases the risk." "It increases our chances," Rowan countered. One of us needs to be at the landing pad when the ship arrives, and one of us needs to trigger the diversion from a distance. Their eyes met, unspoken concerns passing between them. In the short time since their escape, they had developed an understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. The connection of two people united in survival against overwhelming odds. "Be careful," Sala said finally. "I didn't break you out of an execution just to lose you now." Rowan managed a smile. "I'm harder to kill than that." 30 minutes, landing pad access corridor. "If I'm not there, I'll wait as long as possible," she promised. But Tarek won't. They split up, Rowan taking the majority of the explosives and heading toward the far reaches of the spaceport. The facility was larger than it appeared from outside, a complex warren of corridors, storage areas, and processing centers. He placed the devices strategically, focusing on locations that would create maximum disruption with minimal structural damage. They needed to distract, not destroy their own escape route. As he worked, he kept alert for Mokhtari movement. The pursuit had gone ominously quiet, which usually meant they were regrouping for a coordinated approach. Commander Vek's reputation for patient, inexorable tactics was well-earned. The final explosive was placed in an old customs processing center, its placement calculated to drive pursuit away from the landing area. Rowan activated the remote trigger system, synchronizing it with the others, then began making his way back toward the rendezvous point. He was halfway there when he heard it, the subtle click of armored boots on the aged flooring ahead. Mokhtari soldiers, moving with practiced stealth, had managed to flank his position. Ducking into a service alcove, Rowan evaluated his options. The most direct route back to Sala was now blocked. Alternative paths would take precious time they didn't have. Making a swift decision, he triggered the first explosive, earlier than planned but necessary. The distant boom sent vibrations through the floor, followed by the sounds of the Mokhtari squad ahead, redirecting toward the disturbance. Rowan slipped from his hiding place, moving rapidly through the temporarily cleared corridor. He would need to circle around, using the continued detonations as cover for his movement. The rendezvous time was approaching fast, too fast for comfort. Meanwhile, Sala had secured the landing pad access as planned. The massive bay doors, once used for cargo loading, had been modified by the Resistance for quick deployment. She initiated the opening sequence, careful to maintain minimal power usage that might be detected by Mokhtari scanners. The landing pad itself had been cleared of debris, relatively recent work, she noted with approval. At least some Resistance members had maintained this evacuation route despite the increased Mokhtari presence in the sector. She established communication with their extraction pilot, transmitting the landing coordinates and security codes that would identify them as the correct passengers rather than Mokhtari plants. "Confirmed," came Tarek's terse response. "Atmospheric entry in 9 minutes. Be ready." Sala checked the time again, anxiety building. No sign of Rowan yet, and the first explosion had come earlier than they had planned. Something had gone wrong. The bay doors completed their opening cycle, revealing the landing pad beyond. The perpetual twilight of Kalen Prime's domed environment cast everything in muted blues and grays. In the distance, the dome itself shimmered faintly, the beginning of the maintenance cycle that would create their narrow window of opportunity. A second explosion echoed from deeper in the facility, then a third in rapid succession. Not the measured sequence they had planned. Rowan was using them all at once, either as an effective diversion or out of necessity. Sala made her decision. She couldn't leave the landing area now, not with extraction imminent, but she could secure Rowan's path back. Moving to the corridor leading from the main facility, she set up a defensive position with clear lines of sight in both directions. 5 minutes passed, then 7. The sound of distant energy weapon discharge reached her. Rowan had encountered resistance. The landing pad doors were fully open now, the maintenance cycle of the dome advancing to the critical stage where atmospheric fluctuations would mask a ship's entry. "Where are you?" Sala whispered, dividing her attention between the corridor and the open landing pad. A flicker of movement caught her. And not from the corridor, but from a side access she had overlooked. She swung her weapon toward it, finger tensing on the trigger. Rowan emerged, breathing heavily, a fresh energy weapon burn scoring his left arm. Relief flooded through her, immediately followed by renewed vigilance as she covered his approach. Took the scenic route. He gasped as he reached her position. Vex himself is coordinating. Had to use all the diversions at once. Did it work? Temporarily. They're regrouping now, probably realized it was a diversion. You checked the landing pad. All right. Any moment, Sala confirmed, helping him into better cover. The dome cycle is almost at optimal phase. Above them, barely visible through the shimmer of the dome, a light appeared, moving too deliberately to be a star. It grew rapidly larger, resolving into the silhouette of a ship making a steep, powered descent. That's not a smuggler's vessel, Rowan said with sudden alarm. That's a Mokhtari interceptor. They watched in horror as the ship punched through the weakened section of the dome, atmospheric stabilizers flaring to compensate for the transition. It was indeed a Mokhtari military craft, sleek, heavily armed, and heading directly for their position. They predicted our extraction point, Sala realized. They've been waiting for us to signal for pickup. We need to move, now, Rowan urged, already pushing away from their position. Back into the facility. Before they could retreat, the ship's forward lights locked onto them, bathing the landing pad in harsh illumination. An amplified voice boomed from external speakers. Prisoners Varden and Navareth, you are surrounded. Your extraction vessel has been intercepted. Surrender immediately, and you will not be harmed. The voice was cold, precise, and carried the unmistakable cultured accent of Mokhtari High Command. Commander Vex himself. They're lying about not harming us, Sala said unnecessarily. Both knew that recapture meant execution, public and excruciating to serve as an example. Options? Rowan asked, mind racing through scenarios, each more desperate than the last. Sala scanned the landing pad, her gaze settling on an abandoned maintenance crawler near the edge, a heavy vehicle once used to transport equipment across the spaceport grounds. That crawler, if we can reach it, we might be able to use it as cover to reach the perimeter fence. Beyond, that is the industrial waste zone. Even Mokhtari don't pursue fugitives in there without heavy protection. It was the thinnest of hopes, but their only one. The interceptor was completing its landing cycle, the whine of its engines powering down. Soon troops would deploy, and their last chance would vanish. On my mark, Rowan said, rechecking his weapons charge. I'll lay down covering fire. You make for the crawler. Once you reach it, cover me. Sala nodded, tense to run. Rowan counted down silently, then shouted, now. He rose from cover, firing a continuous barrage at the interceptor's viewports and troop deployment ramps. The energy bolts splashed harmlessly against the ship's shields, but served their purpose of distraction. Sala sprinted across the exposed landing pad. Energy bolts from the ship's defensive systems tracking her movement, but failing to connect with her swiftly moving form. She reached the crawler, diving behind its massive treads as return fire intensified. Raising her rifle above the crawler's chassis, she provided the promised covering fire. Move, she yelled to Rowan. He broke from his position, running in an erratic pattern to complicate targeting. Halfway to the crawler, disaster struck. The interceptor's forward cannon activated, firing not at the fleeing fugitives but at the ground before them. The blast cratered the landing pad, the shockwave throwing Rowan violently sideways. He crashed against abandoned cargo containers, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Disoriented, he struggled to rise as the interceptor's deployment ramp lowered, disgorging armored troops. Rowan, Sala's voice cut through his dazed state. She had broken cover, was firing steadily at the advancing troops while trying to reach his position. Stay back, he shouted, finally regaining his feet. The crawler was their only hope, and he was too far from it now, cut off by the crater and advancing Mokhtari forces. In that moment of clarity, Rowan made his decision. Checking the remote detonator still clutched in his hand, he confirmed one explosive remained undetonated, the largest one placed in a fuel storage area. Sala, get to the crawler now, he commanded. I'll make a path for you. Before she could protest, he triggered the final explosive. The blast was massive, far larger than the previous ones. The entire left side of the facility erupted in flame and debris, the shock wave rolling across the landing pad. The Makhtari troops turned instinctively toward the new threat, their discipline momentarily overcome by the scale of the explosion. In that instant of distraction, Rowan charged, not toward the crawler, but toward the Makhtari interceptor itself. If he couldn't escape, he would ensure Sala could. "What are you doing?" she screamed, understanding dawning in her golden eyes. "Find beacon point." Rowan called back. "The resistance needs you alive." He reached the interceptor, diving beneath it where the troops couldn't easily target him. Drawing his last concussion charge, a small but potent explosive saved for emergency breaching. He slapped it against the ship's landing gear and primary engine intake. The Makhtari realized his intention too late. The charge detonated, tearing through critical systems. Alarms blared from the interceptor as its power systems fluctuated wildly. The distraction worked. Every Makhtari soldier converged on the damaged ship, trying to secure it before catastrophic failure. In the chaos, Sala had a clear path to the perimeter. Rowan remained under the interceptor, using its bulk as shield while he fired at any Makhtari who tried to pursue Sala. Through gaps in the confusion, he saw her reach the crawler, activate its ancient drives with surprising speed, and crash it through the perimeter fence. A figure in ornate Makhtari command armor strode down the interceptor's ramp, moving with deadly purpose despite the chaos around him. Commander Vex, personally joining the hunt. His helmet turned toward Rowan's position with mechanical precision. "A noble sacrifice, Executioner Varden." Vex's amplified voice carried over the alarms. "But futile. We will recapture the Illyrian princess. Your defiance has only prolonged the inevitable." "You underestimate her," Rowan replied, knowing Vex could hear him through the helmet's enhanced audio systems. "You always underestimated all of us." A squad of troops surrounded Rowan's position, weapons trained on him from all angles. There was nowhere left to run, no more tricks to deploy. But he had accomplished what mattered. Sala had escaped, carrying with her the hope of continued resistance. "Surrender now, and your execution will be swift," Vex offered with clinical detachment. "Continue resistance, and we will ensure you live long enough to witness the princess's recapture and punishment." Rowan evaluated his options with the cold calculation of a soldier who had accepted his fate. His weapon had one charge remaining, not enough to fight his way out, but enough for one final act of defiance. "I was your executioner once," Rowan said, finger tensing on the trigger. "I won't be your prisoner again." He raised his weapon, not toward Vex or his soldiers, but toward the damaged engine housing above. One shot, precisely placed, into systems already destabilized by the concussion charge. Vex realized his intention an instant too late. "Stop him!" Rowan fired. The energy bolt struck the exposed power coupling, creating a cascade failure in the interceptor's already damaged systems. The resulting explosion consumed the ship in a fireball that expanded outward, engulfing Rowan, Vex, and the surrounding troops in purifying fire. From the industrial waste zone beyond the perimeter, Sala witnessed the explosion with horror and understanding. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the full extent of Rowan's sacrifice. He had given everything, not just to save her, but to strike a meaningful blow against their oppressors. The crawler's systems beeped urgently, detecting an incoming ship from high atmosphere. For a moment, she feared another Makhtari vessel, but the transponder code identified it as their original extraction. Tarek had somehow evaded the Makhtari interception. As the smuggler's ship descended toward her position, Sala made a silent vow. Rowan's sacrifice would not be in vain. She would find Beacon Point, rally what remained of the resistance, and continue the fight against the Makhtari Empire. The chains that had bound her in the Judgment Arena were gone, broken by a man who had found his courage when it mattered most. Now, she would carry that courage forward, a living monument to the executioner who had refused to execute, who had shattered his whip and changed the course of a galaxy. The smuggler's ship landed beside the crawler. Its loading ramp descended, revealing a grizzled human pilot with a weathered face and calculating eyes. "You, Sala," he called over the whine of engines. "Where's the other one?" Sala glanced back at the inferno that had once been the Mokhtari interceptor. "He didn't make it," she said, voice tight with emotion. "He gave us this chance." The pilot, Tarek, presumably, followed her gaze, understanding dawning on his face. "Then we don't waste it," he said gruffly. "Get in." Dome cycle's almost over. Sala climbed aboard, legs feeling like lead. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, leaving exhaustion and grief in its wake. The ship's interior was utilitarian, a converted military transport with cargo. Holds modified for smuggling. Tarek sealed the hatch behind her and returned to the cockpit without ceremony. "Secure yourself," he instructed, gesturing to a jump seat. "Takeoff's going to be rough." Mokhtari reinforcements inbound from orbital patrol. Sala strapped in, watching through the viewports as the spaceport receded beneath them. The fire from the destroyed interceptor had spread to parts of the facility, orange flames stark against Kalen Prime's perpetual twilight. Somewhere in that inferno lay the man who had saved her life, twice now. Entering dome transition, Tarek announced, hands flying across the ship's controls. "Hold tight." The ship accelerated sharply upward, aiming for the weakened section of the atmospheric dome. Sala felt the momentary resistance as they passed through the energy field, then the distinctive shudder as they broke into open space. "Mokhtari vessels detecting us," Tarek reported calmly. "Engaging countermeasures." The ship banked hard, deploying some kind of sensor jamming technology. Through the viewport, Sala could see the orbital defenses of Kalen Prime. Weapons platforms and patrol ships suddenly alert to their unauthorized departure. "Can we outrun them?" she asked. "Not conventionally," Tarek replied with a tight smile. "But we're not going to run conventional." He activated a sequence on the navigation console. The stars outside the viewport elongated, then flashed into a swirling tunnel of light as the ship jumped to hyperspace, well within the planetary gravity well. A dangerous maneuver that most navigation computers would refuse to execute. "Custom NAV system," Tarek explained, seeing her surprise. "Calculated the jump myself. Risky, but the Mokhtari won't be able to track our vector." The hyperspace tunnel stabilized around them, the ship's subtle vibrations settling into a rhythm that indicated successful transition. They had escaped. Sala released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said simply. Tarek shrugged. "Your medic friend called in quite a favor. And I've got no love for the Mokhtari. They confiscated my best ship 3 years ago." He studied her with newfound curiosity. "So you're the Illyrian princess everyone's been talking about." "Former princess," Sala corrected. "My title means nothing now." "Means something to the resistance," Tarek countered. "And to the Mokhtari, evidently, given the resources they deployed to recapture you." Sala didn't respond. Her thoughts had returned to Rowan, to his final moments and the sacrifice he had made. A man who had endured years as the instrument of Mokhtari cruelty, only to find redemption in one act of defiance. "Your friend," Tarek said after a while, surprising her with his perception. "The one who didn't make it. He must have been someone special." "He was," Sala agreed quietly, "though I barely knew him." "Sometimes it's not about how long you know someone," the smuggler observed with unexpected wisdom. "It's about what you see in them when it matters." The ship's medical bay was rudimentary but functional. Sala treated her remaining injuries, the physical pain a distant echo compared to the hollow feeling in her chest. She found clean clothing in a storage locker, plain shipboard attire, but blessedly free of bloodstains and a lingering scent of fear. Later, in the ship's small galley, Tarek provided a meal of synth protein and hydration tablets. Unappetizing but nourishing. "We'll reach the rendezvous point in about 14 hours, he informed her. "From there, you'll transfer to another vessel. I don't know the final destination. Compartmentalized information for everyone's safety." "Beacon Point," Sala said, remembering Rowan's final words. "That's where I need to go." Tarek's expression registered surprise, then careful neutrality. "I don't know anything about that," he said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. "My job is just to get you to the rendezvous." Sala didn't press. If Beacon Point truly housed the remnants of Republic leadership, secrecy would be their primary defense. She would find her way there eventually. She retreated to a small cabin Tarek had allocated her, seeking solitude and rest. Sleep proved elusive despite her exhaustion. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Rowan's face, heard his final words, "Find Beacon Point. The Resistance needs you alive." In the darkness of the cabin, she made a silent vow. She would honor his sacrifice by continuing the fight, by ensuring that the Mokhtari Empire faced resistance until its final day. She would find Beacon Point, unite the fragmented opposition forces, and become the leader her people needed, not as a princess of Illyria, but as a soldier in the battle for freedom. "I will remember you, Rowan Varden," she whispered to the void of space, "and I will make your sacrifice matter." 14 hours later, Tarek's ship dropped out of hyperspace in a remote sector, well away from established travel routes. A larger vessel awaited them, an old Republic corvette painted with civilian merchant markings, its weapon emplacements cleverly disguised as sensor arrays and communication equipment. "That's your ride," Tarek confirmed. "They're expecting you." As the ships completed docking procedures, Sala gathered her few possessions. When the airlock opened, she found herself facing a group of armed individuals in nondescript clothing. Humans, Illyrians, and other species once united under the Republic banner. A tall Illyrian woman stepped forward, her green skin a shade lighter than Sala's, her eyes a deep amber that widened in recognition. "Commander Navareth," she said, formal but clearly emotional. "We feared you had been lost." "Captain Ayerin," Sala replied, recognizing one of her former officers. "It seems reports of my demise were premature. When we heard about the arena," Ayerin trailed off, then straightened. "It is good to have you back, Commander." Sala turned to Tarek, extending her hand in the universal gesture of respect. "Thank you for the extraction. I won't forget what you did." The smuggler accepted the handshake with surprising formality. "Safe travels, Commander," he said, then leaned closer to add in a whisper, "Beacon Point is real. Ask for Admiral Tirius." Before she could respond, he had withdrawn to his ship. The airlock sealed, and within minutes, his vessel detached and disappeared back into hyperspace. As Sala followed Ayerin deeper into the corvette, the captain provided a brief update. "We've established new cell structures since the purge on Kalen Prime. Communications are limited but secure. The remaining resistance factions are scattered but operational." "What about larger coordination?" Sala asked. "Central Command?" Ayerin hesitated. "There are rumors of a gathering point beyond the outer reach. Some say former Republic military leadership has established a base there, coordinating long-term strategy." She glanced around, though they were alone in the corridor. "They call it Beacon Point. It's more than a rumor," Sala said with quiet certainty. "That's where we need to go. Commander, with respect, we don't even know if it exists, let alone its location." "Then we'll find it," Sala replied with the same determination that had carried her through years of resistance. "There's someone there I need to speak with, Admiral Tirius." Ayerin's eyes widened. "Admiral Tirius?" "He was presumed killed during the fall of the Central Worlds." "Presumptions are the Mokhtari's weakness," Sala said. "They presume too much and understand too little. If Tirius lives, if Beacon Point exists, we will find them." She paused, her thoughts returning to Rowan. "Someone very brave gave his life to ensure I escaped. He believed in Beacon Point, in the possibility of organized resistance. I won't let his sacrifice be for nothing." The captain studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I've followed you into battle many times, Commander. I won't stop now. If Beacon Point exists, we will find it together." Over the following weeks, Sala threw herself into rebuilding the resistance network. The corvette, called the Widow's Promise, served as a mobile command center, never staying in one location long enough for Mokhtari forces to track them. They moved between hidden outposts, scattered survivor colonies, and abandoned facilities throughout the sector. At each stop, Sala shared her story, not just of her escape, but of Rowan's sacrifice. The tale of the executioner who shattered his whip and defied the Empire spread among resistance cells, becoming a symbol of hope and the possibility of redemption. Even those who had served the Makhtari could find their way back to the light. Gradually, whispers about Beacon Point grew more concrete. Coordinates were pieced together from fragmented messages. Verification codes were discovered in Old Republic emergency protocols. A pattern emerged, a trail deliberately left for those clever and persistent enough to follow it. 3 months after her escape from Kalen Prime, the Widow's Promise made a blind hyperspace jump to coordinates on the very edge of charted space. When they emerged, a massive asteroid field surrounded them, its chaotic pattern serving as natural camouflage. No sign of a base, Ayaren reported from the sensor station. Just debris and radiation signatures. It's here, Sala insisted. Broadcast the verification sequence we assembled. The communication officer transmitted the complex series of codes and pauses they had reconstructed from scattered sources. Silence followed, stretching into minutes. Then, without warning, a section of what appeared to be ordinary asteroid shifted, revealing the unmistakable outline of a concealed docking bay. A tight beam transmission reached their ship. Widow's Promise, you are cleared for approach. Follow the guide, beacons precisely. Any deviation will result in immediate defensive measures. They navigated the treacherous path through the asteroid field, following barely visible energy markers to the camouflaged entrance. As they passed through the outer shielding, a vast internal space revealed itself. Not just a simple base, but an entire installation built within and between multiple asteroids connected by sealed tunnels and protected docking structures. Ships of various designs, many bearing disguised or modified Republic markings, occupied berths throughout the facility. People moved with purpose along transparent connecting walkways. Defense systems, both visible and concealed, covered every approach vector. Beacon Point was real, and far more significant than they had dared to hope. A reception committee awaited them at the docking bay, armed security personnel with the disciplined bearing of professional military, not the desperate intensity of resistance fighters. At their center stood a tall, silver-haired human whose bearing commanded respect despite his civilian attire. Sala recognized him immediately from historical briefings and Republic military ceremonies she had attended as Illyrian royalty. Admiral Tyrius, once the highest-ranking officer in the Republic fleet, now the heart of whatever remained of organized resistance. Commander Navareth, he greeted her as she descended the boarding ramp. Your journey here has been long and costly. Welcome to Beacon Point, Admiral. Sala acknowledged with the formal salute of the Republic forces. Thank you for receiving us. Come, Tyrius said, gesturing toward an interior doorway. We have much to discuss. He led them through the facility, which proved even more extensive than it had appeared from outside. Entire sections housed training facilities, manufacturing capabilities, intelligence operations, and living quarters for thousands of personnel from dozens of former Republic worlds. We've been operating here for nearly 3 years, Tyrius explained as they walked, gathering resources, personnel, and most importantly, information. The Makhtari believe they've won. That resistance is nothing more than isolated terrorist cells. They don't realize we're building something much more substantial. A counteroffensive? Sala asked, hope coloring her voice. Eventually, Tyrius confirmed. But not yet. We need more than weapons and ships. We need unity, a catalyst that can bring the oppressed worlds together. He glanced at her meaningfully. That's where you come in, Commander. They reached a conference room where several other officers awaited, a mix of species and former ranks, now united in common purpose. Tyrius introduced them briefly, then activated a holographic display showing the known galaxy, with Makhtari-controlled territory highlighted. Tell us about your escape from Kalen Prime, he requested. We've heard fragments, but we need the complete account. Sala recounted the events in detail. Her capture, the arena, Rowan's unexpected defiance, their flight through the city and industrial sector, and his final sacrifice. The room remained silent throughout, all eyes fixed on her. When she finished, Tyrius nodded slowly. "Former Captain Rowan Varden," he said. "His name was on our list of high-value potential recruits before he was captured. We received intelligence that he had been pressed in his service as an executioner, but lost track of his psychological state. We feared he had truly turned. He never did," Sala said firmly. "He was surviving, waiting for the right moment. When it came, he didn't hesitate. And he told you specifically to find Beacon Point?" one of the other officers asked. "Yes. He learned of it from a former Republic medic still operating in Kalen Prime." Tyrius exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Varden's actions have created an opportunity we didn't anticipate. His story is spreading through the occupied territories, the executioner who broke his chains and defied the Empire. It's becoming a symbol, a rallying point. People need symbols," Sala acknowledged. "But they need more than that. They need organization, resources, leadership. Precisely why you're here," Tyrius said. "The Illyrian royal houses still command respect throughout the former Republic. Combined with your actual resistance experience, and now this dramatic escape, you represent exactly the kind of unifying figure we need." Sala understood what he was suggesting. "You want me to be the public face of a renewed resistance." "More than that," Tyrius corrected. "We want you to help us transform isolated resistance into revolution. The Mokhtari Empire is not as stable as it appears. They've expanded too quickly, stretched their resources too thin. Intelligence suggests fractures forming within their command structure. And you think my story, our story, could help exploit those fractures?" "I know it can," Tyrius said with conviction. "But this isn't a decision to make lightly. Once you step into this role, there's no going back. The Mokhtari will focus everything on hunting you down." "They already are," Sala pointed out. "I've been living with that reality for years. The difference now is that we have something they don't expect, structure, strategy, and a base they don't know exists." She rose from her seat, moving to the holographic display. Her fingers traced the outline of Illyrian space, then expanded to the surrounding sectors. "If we're going to do this," she said, "we do it properly. Not just raids and sabotage, but systematic liberation. Planet by planet, sector by sector." She turned to face the assembled officers. "Rowan gave his life, believing in the possibility of real resistance, of eventual victory. I intend to honor that belief." Tyrius studied her with approval. "Then let's begin," he said, activating a more detailed tactical display. Operation Shattered Chain, the first coordinated strike against Mokhtari control. As they delved into planning, Sala felt something settle within her, a sense of purpose that transcended personal vendetta or even loyalty to her homeworld. This was about restoring freedom to an oppressed galaxy, about proving that chains, both literal and figurative, could be broken. Rowan's face remained clear in her memory, his final words echoing in her thoughts. He had found the courage to break free when it mattered most. Now she would carry that courage forward, transforming one man's defiance into a movement that could change the fate of worlds. 2 years later, Sala stood on the observation deck of the Republic Liberty, a reclaimed warship now serving as the flagship of the United Resistance Fleet. Beyond the viewport, the lights of liberated Kalen Prime glowed against the darkness of space, the first major world reclaimed from Mokhtari control. The battle had been hard-fought but decisive. Mokhtari forces, spread thin by simultaneous uprisings across multiple sectors, had been unable to maintain their grip on the strategically important world. Operation Shattered Chain had expanded far beyond its initial objectives, catching the Empire in a web of coordinated resistance they hadn't believed possible. "Commander," a voice spoke from behind her. "The memorial is ready." Sala turned to find Captain Ayerin waiting respectfully. The captain had been at her side throughout the campaign, a loyal officer and increasingly a friend. "Thank you, Ayerin. I'll be there shortly." When the captain had departed, Sala returned her gaze to the planet below. Somewhere on that surface lay the ruins of the Judgment Arena, now a pile of rubble after precision strikes had targeted symbols of Mokhtari oppression. Somewhere else was the old industrial sector where Rowan had made his final stand. She touched the small medallion she wore at her throat. A simple disc of metal salvage from the wreckage of the arena, fashioned into the emblem of the unified resistance. On one side, the traditional Republic star. On the other, the stylized image of a shattered whip. "We did it, Rowan," she said softly to the empty observation deck. "We're taking it back, one world at a time." The memorial ceremony was held in what had once been the Mokhtari governor's palace, now repurposed as resistance headquarters. Representatives from dozens of worlds and resistance factions gathered in the central courtyard, where a simple monument had been erected, a stone column inscribed with the names of those who had given their lives in the liberation of Kalen Prime. At the top of the list, larger than the others, Rowan Varden. Sala stepped forward as the assembled crowd fell silent. Her formal uniform, a blend of Illyrian royal colors and Republic military styling, gleamed in the evening light. The legendary golden eyes that had become a symbol of resistance propaganda swept across the gathering. "Today we honor those who cannot stand with us to witness this victory," she began, her voice carrying easily through the courtyard. "Each name on this monument represents courage, sacrifice, and the unquenchable desire for freedom that lives in all of us." She placed her hand on the stone, fingers tracing Rowan's name. 2 years ago, in the Judgment Arena not far from where we stand, a man faced an impossible choice. Continue as an instrument of oppression, or risk everything for what he knew was right. Her voice grew stronger, infused with the passion that had inspired countless worlds to rise. He chose freedom, not just for himself, not just for one prisoner, but for the idea of freedom itself. The story spread because it speaks to something fundamental in all of us. None of us are defined by our chains. We can break them at any moment if we find the courage. And when we do, we inspire others to break theirs as well. She turned back to the assembled crowd, meeting the eyes of resistance fighters who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. The Mokhtari thought fear would keep us in line. They thought public punishments and executions would break our spirit. They were wrong. Every act of cruelty only strengthened our resolve. Every loss only deepened our commitment. This victory belongs to everyone who fought, everyone who resisted in ways large and small. But it especially belongs to those who cannot be here to see it, those whose sacrifice made it possible. A moment of silence followed her words, broken only by the soft evening wind. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice began to sing, the old Republic anthem, its lyrics of unity and freedom once banned under pain of death. Another voice joined, then another, until the courtyard resonated with the forbidden melody. Sala remained at the monument as the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed. In the quiet aftermath, she found herself alone with her thoughts and the names of the fallen. Quite a speech. A familiar voice remarked from the shadows near the courtyard entrance. Tarek the smuggler, older and more weathered but unmistakable, stepped into view. "You came," Sala observed with genuine pleasure. The smuggler had become an occasional but valuable ally, his network providing crucial intelligence and supply lines during the early resistance campaigns. "Couldn't miss the big victory celebration," Tarek replied with his characteristic casualness. "Plus, I brought something you might want to see." He approached, retrieving a small, battered data chip from his pocket. "Found this while salvaging in the industrial sector. Took some doing to retrieve the data, but..." He handed it to her. "Thought you should have it." Sala accepted the chip, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "Security footage from the old spaceport," Tarek explained. "From that day. The final moments." Her fingers tightened around the chip. "You mean..." "Varden's last stand," Tarek confirmed. "Not the cleanest footage, but clear enough." She stared at the small object, emotions warring within her. "Thank you," she said finally. "This means more than you know." Figured as much. The smuggler glanced around the courtyard, noting the monument and the fresh tribute offerings scattered at its base. "He's become quite the legend, hasn't he?" The executioner who changed sides. Legends are powerful, Saleh acknowledged. They inspire people in ways that strategic plans and political speeches cannot. And this one, Tarek gestured to the monument. This one is true, Saleh said simply. A man found his courage when it mattered most. He shattered his chains, and in doing so, showed others they could shatter theirs. Later, alone in her quarters, Saleh inserted the data chip into her personal console. The footage flickered to life, grainy, damaged, but unmistakable. The Mokhtari interceptor landing on the spaceport pad. The exchange of fire. Rowan's desperate charge toward the ship after ensuring her escape. The final detonation that consumed everything in cleansing fire. She watched it several times, each viewing filling in details of a moment she had only witnessed from a distance. Rowan's final act of defiance had been even more deliberate than she had realized. A calculated sacrifice made with clear purpose and no hesitation. When she could watch no more, she secured the chip in a protected compartment of her desk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, strategic planning for the next phase of the campaign, diplomatic negotiations with worlds considering joining the resistance, and the 1,000 other tasks that came with leadership. But tonight, she honored the memory of the man who had begun it all, not with grand gestures or public declarations, but with quiet acknowledgement of the truth that had become the foundation of their revolution. Freedom began with a single act of courage, a refusal to be defined by the chains others placed upon you. Somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, the Mokhtari Empire continued to rule, its grip still firm on countless worlds. But that grip was slipping, weakened by the example set in a judgment arena on a single day, when an executioner refused to execute, shattered his whip, and carried hope away from the darkness. Saleh looked out her window at the stars beyond, each one potentially another world waiting for liberation. "The chains are breaking, Rowan," she whispered. Everywhere, and in the quiet of her room, she could almost imagine he heard her.